Alright, we're going to do a read by candlelight. It looks like that light is... No, it doesn't. It kind of looked like the light was on. It's just a reflection of that other light being on. I do have another light in here. Let's see what it looks like without it. We'll see if we really do this all by candlelight. I don't feel like there's going to be sufficient lighting. Is that sufficient lighting? Oh, that's interesting. Okay, well, we're going to do this one by candlelight. Okay. I've had Sunday, and I got out today. I've done things. I was frustrated earlier. We were supposed to have I was not frustrated about not having a family dinner, technically, except that I did make the sides already for it. I had everything prepared for it. I also already had purchased the bread. So I'm gonna have to rebuy and make stuff, which it's fine. It's whatever. I say have family dinner. I have 2 roommates, and our schedules are never totally in alignment, so we rarely are all home at the same time, if not busy. So we had made a plan to have dinner together, but then one of the roommates canceled, so we just decided we'll do it next week. I actually don't really care if we do it at all at this point, to be honest, but it's a nice gesture. I'm not trying to be a dick. I've been a dick all day online. I've been like in this weird mood. I haven't really been a dick. I've more just been passionate about things. I'm pretty sure it was today that I made a video today talking about things. Oh, yeah. Well, that'll be a video for tomorrow, I suppose, to get into some theories. I've been theorizing today. I've been doing different types of meditating and research and just kind of doing some writing, powerhousing through some healing, which was good. I was reflecting on past sexual assaults that I have experienced, and at first had felt some type of way, but it was coming from a somewhat healed place. But then in retrospect, and as I looked back on it and kind of was able to reconsider what I was conveying, I realized that a far more healed space would be to not just seek my own sense of justice and resolution and healing within those experiences, but to recognize that those experiences, although mine, are also shared with the community. You know, what's the word? Like the general consensus of people. I don't know, I can't think of it, I use it all the time. But also specifically to genderize my experiences in a way, because when I had first started talking about it, I was talking about it specifically in defense of women who have dealt with these things, and then realized that, one, I champion male rights, largely in part because I've been blessed to know a lot of men that champion female rights, and I think that there is an extremely important space for men to validate women by championing those things, and I think it's very equally as important for there to be a space for women to do that for men. And I don't see that for men as often as I do for women. In fact, what I see is women demanding that men do that for them, and then bashing women that do it for men. Because men are always the predators, when like almost every man I've ever known has been assaulted by a woman at some point in time. Most of them. Some of them have been assaulted by men. Most of them have been assaulted. Most people that I know, at least in there, my right ear is ringing like crazy right now. Most people that I know in their late 20s to early 40s, thank you. Sorry. I mean, if somebody's saying something good or whatever, great, but that was a lot. Most people that I know in their late 20s to early 40s, which is like my age bracket, have experienced assault in some way, shape, or form. Whether in childhood or in their own adulthood. But it is way too common. It's something that is common in our society, and it's always been common. I think that actually men becoming assaulted is probably on the rise, to be honest, and it's not talked about. Generally, when we talk about assault, we're talking about it in the vein of women, and that comes from a long tradition of women being the more vulnerable of the genders, which is fair. You know, two holes are easier to take advantage of than one, right? But at the same time, we also live in this society where men are largely left vulnerable by not having a space to be vulnerable, and are constantly being taken advantage of by women and by men, and have no space to talk about those things. And, you know, it's one of those things where, when I was growing up, my brother assaulting me, which is something that I have mentioned before, I don't have a problem talking about it openly. I know it's hurtful specifically for him to hear, or for others to hear, but it's the truth. And the thing about it is that my brother was my best friend. I came upon the realization as an adult that he wasn't really a great friend to me. But at the same time, he was still my best friend. He was still the better friend than any of the others that I had had. Maybe I'd gotten the short end of the stick in that way, but I learned from it. I became who I am today for those things. So I don't have animosity towards those things, and I don't hate anyone for those things, and I certainly don't hate him. In fact, I consistently put myself in a position of vulnerability with him in order to be abused by him to certain degrees. I didn't, but I did. I allowed myself to be groomed to different degrees. There were different degrees that were not within my capacity. There were different degrees I was being assaulted that were not under my consent by any means, but there were some that were. There was different levels of responsibility that I had to myself, that I was excusing his behavior and still putting myself in spaces to be vulnerable with him in different ways, knowing the type of person he was, or the type of things that he was capable of. That was weird, but it was light from outside coming through the window. Knowing the type of person that he was and the things that he was capable of, because I felt for him, because he too had been abused and assaulted, and I was aware of those things, even though I didn't know how to properly process those things as a child. And I recognized that where I took my assault at a very young age into a victim mentality, and that's how I turned it. And so I made myself a constant victim in order to protect myself. I just made all these allowances. It doesn't hurt me if I make an allowance for it. He did the opposite. He became predatory in order to not be hurt by those things. You know, I'm not a victim because I'm the one able to be in control of these things, and I'm projecting it onto other people. And I saw him almost in a more fucked up position than I saw myself because of that. Although I ended up, throughout my life and into my adulthood, carrying that victimization and becoming assaulted far more than he had ever experienced. As a young boy, his assault had affected him in just a much deeper way. And his psychology was more sensitive than mine in certain ways. And just being a boy and being raised to be a man, having those things those experiences under his belt, like, affected him so deeply, where I grew up in a society where, like, being assaulted was part of the expectation of being a woman, to be honest. I'm not saying that any of these things are okay. In fact, I'm trying to say that they're not. But that's where my empathy towards him came from, and why I continued to love him through the abuse. Also because, like, everybody wanted to say, like, that anybody that would do those types of things was some kind of monster. But this wasn't a monster. This was my brother. This was somebody I laughed with, somebody I had these secret, like, we had a way of communicating that nobody else really understood. We had secret, like, these jokes that nobody else got, and, like, we, you know, had a way of understanding each other that nobody else seemed to. And I mentioned this in a past video, that largely in part that was just because we had been so trauma bonded. And, you know, his concept of love is trauma bonding, and mine was as well, until I thankfully separated myself from that toxic family structure and was able to learn something better. But he kind of just doubled down into it. And he also had my mom coddling him in a way that neither me nor my other brother were coddled. She had a disdain for us in a weird way, where she had this affection towards him. And it wasn't so obvious, you know, she kind of always tried to balance those things out. She swore that that wasn't the case, but it was obvious enough to me, both me and my oldest brother, that we could communicate about it, and that was actually our trauma bond. But I always felt for my middle brother, for those things. I always understood why he was assaulting me. It never hit that deep. It always was something that I saw something deeper in him going on than I ever took onto myself those ways. And I think that actually benefited me, for the fact that in my life then I you know, continued to undergo different levels of abuse, and different levels of sexual assault and different types of trauma and stuff, where I could see my brother in these people. Not my brother, but that same thing I was able to love in him was what I was able to find in others. That there was, you know, something hurting deep inside of these people that were willing to hurt me. And especially because, like, I didn't, you know, there's been different ways that I've been abused that I can take personal responsibility for. Not that I'm taking responsibility for the action of having been abused, but putting myself in those positions, trusting those people even though my intuition was screaming not to, you know, knowing better in those ways and still making those choices. It doesn't take away from the person. They still have responsibility to their sins and their actions. But I also have responsibility to the positions I tended to put myself into when I knew better, and continue to put myself in those positions. Or when I, just like was looking for a reason to victimize myself, more or less. It's not that I was looking for it or that I wanted those things, but choosing not to stand up for myself and being able to fall back in that victim mentality was not a healthy mindset and not a healthy psychology for me to have. And it took a lot of work and development to come out of that, to the point where now I no longer make excuses for abuse. So I'm no longer in positions to be abused the same way I always was. So I can now recognize my responsibility in that way. I don't know if that makes sense for a lot of people, and I'm sure that's extremely triggering for a lot of people, and I was not anticipating talking about these things. But it was something that I was talking about earlier, and it just came up. So that's something. I should have more discussions about these types of things too, just to have it more well-rounded. You know, I always, and it's probably because I grew up with brothers, and I grew up in a misogynistic home where women were treated like objects for men to create more men, and to be there for men. You know, men was made first, women was made for man, and that was beat into me. And I embraced it. And I still do, to be honest. I embraced it a little too hard, to the point that it gave me some, I say mild in comparison to the way that, like, I know many people to be, especially nowadays, but in comparison to all of the rest of the people around me, it was extreme gender dysphoria. I was quite confused most of my life over my own gender, and my own expression of it. I understood my sex that way. Like, I understood that I didn't even, when I was younger, I didn't even understand that I had a vagina. I wasn't talked to about those things, but my brothers talked about their dicks constantly. So I called my junk my dick and just kept talking about how eventually I was going to hit puberty and my balls were going to drop, and then everybody would understand, like, okay, right, she's a boy. That's why she's this way. That didn't happen, by the way. My vagina persisted, and I got tits, breasts, as the women say. Women don't like when you call them tits because that's objectifying, but I grew up in male mentality. And that is why I tend to care for men, and that is why I try to, you know, create spaces to defend them. And I do make fun of women a lot, and I'm not saying that it's always healthy. It does come from this long-running, like, having grown up with brothers, being the youngest with two older brothers, having to find ways to compete and to, you know, appease them, and having a macho man stepdad. I also have a dead dad. I never even had my real dad. And my mom, I have a lot of mommy issues, so, like, you know, I am the way that I am for reasons. That's like a long-running joke that I have too, is I got reasons. And I do, but I'm not trying to validate being toxic in those ways. I am trying to use those things for actual good. So it's things like that where, like, I can champion for women when I'm talking about women's rights, when I'm talking about being, you know, somebody who's experienced multiple rapes, multiple sexual assaults, as a woman, and only from men. You know, I haven't been assaulted by women that way. I've been assaulted by men that way multiple times. From men I knew and thought that I could trust, to men I didn't know and couldn't point out in a, you know, police lineup. Usually, though, it was men that were close. That's often how it goes. And I noticed, too, in growing up and dealing with those things, that, like, a lot of women, like, a lot of the lesbians that I've known, like, they were also assaulted. And the way that they took it was to turn on men. Now, they have no interest in men. Now, they're afraid of men, or they're disinterested in men. But again, like, I did that weird victimization thing. It's just how I'm built. It's just part of my psychology. Like, I'm attracted to men. I act like a dude. I feel like a dude. I think like a dude, right? I've embraced that I'm a woman, because I also like presenting as a woman, and I have a vagina. But I still have this weird trans mentality as a man, and I'm okay with it. It's other people that have a problem with that, and I don't always give a fuck, and that's why I'm an asshole. You know, and it's not that I'm saying, like, who cares? Everybody has to deal with it. I'm working on it to some degree, but some of the ways that I'm working on it is just embracing it and accepting it and forcing other people to do the same, because this is who I am, and you don't get to control me just because you feel some type of way. I dealt with that my whole life, and I'm not doing it anymore. Also, if women would stop being fucking insane, that would be helpful. Okay, I'm aware that this video is, like, not coming across as very pleasant to women. A lot of the things that I do and say are that way. I obviously do have a lot of mommy issues I still need to work out. But it's not just mommy issues. I have tried my hardest and continue to try to... I have good women friends. I have good women that are my friends, and I have good relationships with some women. They just seem so few and far between, where I try to put myself in largely womanified spaces with lots of women. I try to surround myself with women as much as possible in my adult life because I kind of lacked that growing up. I didn't. I grew up in Christian schools where I was always in these spaces, but I didn't accept it and receive it the same sort of way. But I've just always struggled with women, even growing up and in school and stuff. You know, women don't like anything. They love to complain. They love to gossip. They love to bitch and judge and control. And those aren't things I'm interested in. I have found it much easier to be friends with men in general than it is to be with women. And the women that I'm generally friends with are like chill fucking women. We're all a little bit crazy. We're all a little bit insane, obviously. You know, we can get wild. We have our emotions and stuff like that. But like women that just like got along right in the beginning and just like are chill and cool about it. Not catty women that love gossiping behind people's backs and that like are, you know, have to use men in order to validate themselves or have to like constantly, you know, like women that like try to fight other women and stuff like that. Like I ain't about it. I'm not about it. I think it's pathetic. That's not what it's about. I'm extremely blessed to have the women that I have in my life that I keep close. And some of those women are trans women too. And I'm extremely blessed to have them as well because I've always kind of had that weird structure in between the two. So to be able to embrace what a woman is helpful for me because I didn't grow up with a lot of support in that direction. You know, largely just because my mom hates herself, you know. She doesn't want to, but she does, and thus she hated me in so many different ways, and it was just like this big thing, and, you know, my stepdad's probably gay. He's too macho. He's so macho. He did, you know, like, everything is so man-based that it's like, dude, just admit that you suck dicks in truck stops. It's not that weird. It's not that plenty of people do it. It's been going on forever. Ever since there's been truck stops, there's been dudes sucking each other's dicks in there. Like, not a big deal. Happens in public restrooms all across the world. It does, and it's true. Okay, I don't know if my stepdad's actually gay because he's never come out of the closet. This is my gaydar going off, right? Pretty sure my mom's just a beard. Anyways, okay, I'm trying to do a read. This whole thing has turned into something that could be part of my comedy special. And that's fine. And that's fine. And I embrace it. And I embrace it. And I receive it. And I accept it. And I just let it be what it is. And now I don't need to talk about it anymore. But what are we going to talk about? What are we going to talk about? Probably my need to do some serious internal work about gender issues because, you know, I'm obviously a little fucked up. It's fine. I'm fine. It's fine and I'm fine. It's fine. Everybody's fine. Everything's okay. Don't worry about it. I think the card just flipped in the deck. Yes. Okay. This will be the main card. We'll go from here. Okay. The main card that I got is the Seven of Swords in reverse. See that? Oh, they look neat in the candlelight. Okay. Put that up there. And the story that I have underneath it is the Ace of Swords in the upright, the King of Wands in the reverse, and Death in the upright. I can embrace my truth and transition into my higher power, which I am lacking when I am in this energy of like questioning myself. But also I've read this card before as greed, but it's in the reverse. So like not being thankful for what I have has been a long-running issue of mine, and I assume probably largely affects these issues that I've been talking about, right? But there's a power in that. Okay, so it's like, normally it'd be like, okay, I have so much good and of myself that I could be grateful for, but there's still these other things that I could have. But in the reverse, it's almost like, okay, then like, move into that. It's weird that I'm reading it that way, because I guess it's technically saying move away from it. But it's like, lean into that. What is that? What are these two swords? I mean, one is the Ace of Swords, which is a masculine energy. That's immediately when I see it, what I see, especially with the crown on it. It definitely is reading to me like my dick envy. I do actually practice phallic worship. Yoni worship as well, but that one is more personal, probably because I have a vagina. Phallic worship is something different for me that resonates closely to the same way that Christianity always did. In different ways. In different ways. Yoni worship to me is like a far more spiritual, emotional thing. Where phallic worship is like a mental, physical thing. I could probably use a balance between those things, but a little bit more. But I do seek a balance between those things. I just happen to be who I am and how I am. But phallic worship is important to me, and it is an aspect of my self-expression. Yeah, and it's an interesting one because I got in my last few reads have been really weird because I've obviously been like in some sort of transitionary state, feeling some type of way about myself, which these are representative of, you know, death being the transition and the King of Wands in the reverse, like having these weird uncertainties. I'm having these triggers come up of my insecurities, more or less is what's happening, and that's kind of like what's necessary to move into this transition. But yeah, and phallic worship is something too that like, yeah, it's important to me. It's important to me, and it's something that I've kind of gotten away from in these bouts of celibacy as I've become slightly embittered towards men. In my own ways. I've also been working to become more open to a different type of man than, you know, the tropes that I was stuck with because of the control tactics I had received from my stepdad. I found that the people that I thought were my type and what I would consistently define as my type used to be quite reflective of what had been trained to me. Not to be my type necessarily, but largely in part, yes, through my stepdad. He had kind of made me, he taught me and trained me and, you know, disciplined me into being a woman, being slutty, being open sexually, being very submissive sexually, but also like specifically for and towards like macho men. And there is something in me that's always gonna like enjoy that trope and want to play with that trope, because obviously that's the way that I was raised. So it's a point of comfort for me. But as I've developed, and like every year it kind of develops deeper and deeper, where like I find that what I'm actually looking for in a partner isn't just this like dumb, beautiful, hairy, strong man that, you know, builds things with hammers and throws rocks at shit and can't think for himself, but is very set on the idea that nobody else can think for him either. That's kind of what it always was. I liked toxic men. You know, like caveman that wouldn't even know where to begin to treat me right, because I also didn't know where to begin to treat myself right. And then as I began to learn how to care for myself, I was like, okay, well now I'm doing it, so I don't need a man to do that. I need a man because he has a penis. And that's not, I mean, it's true. That's part of my attraction to men specifically. I'm more attracted to, I'm attracted to, I have a sexual preference for penis. I do. And that's something that has taken some time to understand and kind of break down, where like I would take a trans woman over that is, you know, pre-op before I would, not emotionally, not mentally, and not spiritually, but physically, I would prefer a trans woman that is pre-op before I would prefer a trans man that is pre-op. And that's because it isn't just about this weird balance of the tropes of genders. It is very much physiological. I engage with my body very openly and consistently. I find women to be beautiful. It's not just, like I say, men and women, right? Obviously, though, like, that's, you know, trans women are women, trans men are men. What a person wants to be identified by is their gender. It's an expression of self. So like, I don't mean to be so dynamic in that, you know what I mean? Like dualistic in that, male or female, but I am talking about like traditionally. And like also in part because my preference has always been for like a macho masculine with a penis. So like that's a specific type of person. Those are generally the people going around being like, I'm a man. This is what a man is, right? And there's something about that I like, because it reminds me of my stepdad, and because I never had my real dad. Okay? I have parental issues that even into my 30s, I am still learning to work out. I'm still finding myself, and I probably will be for the rest of my life. Okay? We just got to deal with it. We got to deal with what I bring to the table, because it's all that I have. But I have learned over time that isn't all that I'm looking for. That I actually swoon for a man that can communicate well. Like, holy shit. I didn't even know that existed until I was like in my mid-20s. You know? One of the first dudes that ever... That's been a big part of my issue too. One of the first dudes that ever actually communicated with me and was open about their feelings and open about their beliefs and was willing to learn about me as much as they were willing to teach me about themselves. Those were things I had never experienced with a boy/man, you know, in my teens, in my childhood, growing up in the church and stuff like that, and into my 20s. So when I separated from my ex-husband, the first person I started talking to that had that quality blew me away. That's what I fell for with them. I didn't care that they were a satanic priest. I liked that they could communicate and that they were nice to me. At the time, they also cursed me then for like 10 years afterwards. So like, nice. Okay. Right? So I learned from that. Moved on. Continued to try to find people that, you know, have these different qualities. And then I kept falling back to that same type of macho, that same type of macho personality. But I was seeking something more than that, right? So then my ex, who I lived with for 6 years, he was like a perfect balance between those things. Really, he actually, well, we were a good balance in different ways aside from being incredibly toxic. But I got to feel like as macho as I wanted to in the relationship and got to do like my macho things and still feel like a woman. And he got to be effeminate and still feel like a man. And we didn't have to prove our sexuality to each other that way, which was wonderful. I loved that about him. And he could communicate. He was also a liar. Really bad with the lying, like basically lied about everything all the time. But I was used to that from dealing with my mom, so I could read through a lot of those lies too and still loved him. And we trauma bonded and built a relationship out of that. And it wasn't a healthy one. And he tried to kill me a couple times. And I kept going back to him. Because we were both incredibly toxic. But he still had that reflection where, like, he had all these different macho qualities, but he was also, like, far more sensitive even than I was in a lot of different ways. And he was far more maternal than I've ever been, where I'm, like, ambitiously driven. And, I tend to be more, like, career driven and, like, trying to take care of, like, the system of things and the grander scheme of things and trying to build on those types of things. And, like, I'm doing the external, and he was very intimate with his way expression. And we found a balance in that. And that was beautiful. And I loved that. I just didn't like him trying to kill me. I didn't like being scared of him or his family. And, even when he was trying to be good, his family was still fucking insane. So he could only be loving and caring for a period of time, and then his family's influence would get the best of him, and he would become a wild man who was not somebody I could easily recognize and who was a threat to my safety and security and mental stability. So it wasn't a good relationship, ultimately. And then after that, I moved on, right? Became absolutely infatuated with, like, peak macho. Fucking a walking butthole. This dude who just played me for fucking 3 years and then weirdly kept following my movements for another year after that, even though I was the one he had called obsessive and stalking. But that was a whole different story, because that man literally walked out of my dreams. I had dreamt about that very specific person fucking 14 years, 15, 16 years prior to ever seeing him. And as soon as I saw him, I knew who he was. I could tell him things about himself that nobody else knew. He didn't understand how I could constantly seem to know him better than anybody else does. Ever has. Also, he's a really closed-off macho type of person, right? And I'm a pretty good read of people when it comes to certain things, especially that personality type. So it wasn't like it was that hard for me, really. It didn't matter how many past lives we might have had together or anything like that. Like, that is like a whole nother theory I'm going to have to get into. But I was obsessed with this man. He was a real attractive piece of meat to me, right? Like, and only because he wouldn't give me anything deeper, but that game, I loved that game as well, and I just was hooked. I was just hooked. I was toxic, and he knew it, and he liked playing on that, and liked the attention, and I could not stop giving it to him, and it was driving me insane. It was driving me to the point of depression. And he thought that was funny. Because I was just a dumb girl. Obsessed. You know, Twitter-pated. And all he had to do was the most basic dumb shit. He didn't even treat me right. He never was nice to me. He was incredibly mean to me, actually. And extremely judgmental. And always trying to just fuck my shit up. And I just loved it. I just ate it up. Because I loved his attention, too. I was so toxic. It was fucked up. And I had to go through a lot in order to be able to get out of that, in order to understand it, and to understand why I kept attracting these types of men, and why I was so attracted to these types of men, and where all this was coming from, and what the fuck. And mostly, I just stopped engaging altogether. Not just with him, but with men. That way, obviously, they're always going to be part of my life, but I learned how to be alone, and how to be happy being alone. And I started practicing longer bouts of celibacy than I had. I started practicing those bouts back in 2015 after Baltimore. Well, it was during Baltimore when I talked about that in one of my last videos. I'd signed up for a psychological operation, and part of it was like keeping me from my sexuality. I forget, there's a word for it. It's like a form of control where you don't allow a person to be sexual at all. And that just kind of stuck. And I've used that and continue to carry that, because it does actually give you a power when you're not giving your power away to other people. Surprising. Also, as a recovering sex addict, I went to a 12-step program for my porn addiction, which I also talked about in a different video. Back in 2012. So as somebody that has consistently kind of always struggled with sexual discipline, that has served me incredibly well, and has become a pretty common form for me to practice sexual discipline. But all of those things kind of led into it. What the fuck am I even talking about? Okay, and then the next relationship, I ended up, you know, I didn't want to look for a relationship, and I wasn't looking for relationships, and I wasn't interested in anybody. And, you know, I met this one dude who was like, his whole character is the epitome of macho. He's also a comedian, and it was all just a joke, and he just was using me and, you know, manipulating me and stealing my shit. So that was something else. He tried to hit me up recently, and I'm just like, as if, like, nothing. And I'm like, these people really think I'm fucking stupid. That's how I've made myself out to be. And I'll just sit there and suck your dick for fucking 2 hours straight when you're so coked out you can't even come until I've done it that long. Yeah, I probably seem like an idiot. Especially when I did it after I've already seen you with fucking every woman in town. It's not that I didn't know better. I was choosing to do those things because I actually enjoyed it. I am dumb. But I wasn't looking for anything at that point in time, and I was also in my own way being non-committal, right? And then I met this dude that I talked about in one of my last videos who just fucking turned my world upside down, because it wasn't like the dude I was infatuated with, where that dude was like, like enigmatic, right? Like that dude has like this magnetism with everyone. Men and women like just fucking fall on their faces for this dude. They also treat him like he's a fucking idiot. His close friends and stuff like that. I'll give it that. But like, he does have this like, well, at least he did have this kind of attractive power that way that he loved to exploit. But this guy, it was the same. Very similar, but I think it's both because they're Leos. I have this thing for Leo men. Love them. Fire signs in general. Sagittarius men too. Aries can suck it, but but them Leos and Sagittariuses are hot stuff. Anyhow, I'm an idiot. This guy was different. This guy was different in every way, but he also proved to be the same in basically all of those same ways too. So, but at least this last guy was somebody who was very open with me and very honest with me about, like, you know, his interests and his goals, and, you know, it only got convoluted when I started pulling away, to be honest. I fucked it up. I don't think that he was perfect to me. I do think that there was a lot of shit going on, and the way that he treated me the last time I saw him really, like, made me feel some type of way. And then I had, like, this dream/nightmare that kind of revealed, like, some deeper things where I was like, yeah, no wonder I couldn't trust this dude. Not like he was, like, sleeping with somebody else in my dream, and I'm just taking that for facts. Like, it revealed these deeper feelings that I hadn't really fully looked at and been willing to process. And upon processing them and seeing them in that way, I realized, like, why I felt the ways that I felt. And I just remembered different ways that he had treated me all along, and that were kind of red flags, and I just had ignored them because the green flags were so green. And I wasn't used to them. And because the thing about him was that, like, the thing about that dude I'd been infatuated with was that he, like, seemed out of my league. So the fact he gave me any attention just had me hooked, right? But this dude didn't seem out of my league. This dude seemed like my ideal partner. Like, I thought we looked good together. He was a little younger than me, and I thought I looked like a fucking hag in comparison to him. I felt very insecure. Actually, but at the same time, I didn't. At the same time, like, I loved us together, and I felt like we fit really well together, and I enjoyed all of the time that we spent, like, holding hands and singing songs, and, you know, watching these, like, funny videos on the internet, and, like, playing these video games, and watching these shows, and eating different kinds of foods, cooking together, spending time with his friends. Like, all those things were just so precious to me. And so I've found throughout these things, and now the last dude I found any interested in, that happened real quick and ended real quick, because it went from me being like, okay, I'm not interested in this dude, he isn't my type, like, he's already got all this other shit going on, to me, like, starting to open myself up to the potentiality of it when he showed a little bit of interest, and then he showed more interest, so I opened myself to showing him the interest in back, and then there was this sense of equality, and we were kind of going back and forth about things in a way that felt really promising. And then we actually engaged with each other at all sexually, and I was kind of domineering, and he was extremely, I don't know what even the word for it would be, because he started it, and he pushed for it, and he allowed it. He wanted all of that. But he also, like, was not capable of performing, and that made him, like, weirdly insecure afterwards. And instead of being able to communicate that, he just didn't communicate with me for, like, a week straight. And then when he did even though I tried to give him space, I wasn't, like, up his ass about it, but I had tried to communicate with him, and he just basically ignored me. And then when he did communicate to me finally, he was extremely arrogant and rude and disrespectful. And I was like, okay, fuck you. And then I went on my own way. And now I'm here. And I'm kind of just really tired. You know, there's somebody else that I was very interested in, but I can't even speak on that. That's like a whole other thing. Because I still have it in my heart that I would like to see what could come of that, but that entire situation was incredibly fucked up, and I'm not fully convinced that the dude wasn't trying to kill me or have me killed. Somebody was, and the way it had been made out to me was that it was potentially him, but I just couldn't believe that, and I was convinced that it was his mom. So I don't really know what to think about that one, so I'm not going to talk about it. Okay, all of that is to say that I am learning, just really slow in the process, because I'm a bit retarded. I'm slow in the process. That's what retarded means. You know, I'm a song that has a speed I normally work at when it comes to intimacy and to my attraction to different men. I'm a bit retarded. I'm just slowed down a bit, and it takes a minute for me to work out these things. Sometimes it takes a few years. That's fine. I have all the time in the world. I'm about to be 35, and I don't care. I don't care. Whatever is going to happen is going to happen. I'm not in a rush to settle down. You know, if it happens, it happens. I'm not sitting here trying to have kids or anything, so like, I'm good. If it happens, it happens. I don't care. I'm not in a rush. Okay, I got time. I got time. Although, and you can't see it in this video, I'll have to point it out in another video. I have like a whole ass streak of gray hair at this point. You can tell how stressful last year was. The most stressful year of my life. I handled it like a boss, but holy shit. Did I go through a lot. And it's proven itself in this giant streak of gray hair I got. Coming in real nicely. It's kind of cute. I like it. I don't give a fuck. But yeah. Okay. Understanding these things. Being willing to embrace these things. You know. Being willing to let go of these like harsh standards that I have while still being able to accept the truth. Being willing to... The King of Wands in reverse. The King of Wands in the upright is like... Like, I know what I got to offer. I know what I got to offer. I know its value. I know what I can do with it. And I'm not afraid to use it. I'm confident. In the reverse, it's like, it's kind of, for some reason, reflecting me in the feminine. And I think it's only because it's right next to this Ace of Swords that is just like making me feel some type of way every time I look at it. It is so phallic to me. And so the King of Wands in reverse next to it, like, is kind of like my little cuck self, like, not feeling fully legitimate in my masculinity, clearly. So, like, having to play this, like, more submissive role about it. Like, yeah, maybe I need to stop apologizing for my masculinity. I'm a woman, I'm extremely feminine, too, but, like, I'm also extremely masculine, and like I am in different ways, maybe not traditionally because I have tits. Pretty sure if I had a dick though, like there would be no question of the type of man that I am. So like the world is so lucky that I don't have a dick, let me tell you what. Well, I'd either be dead or in prison, I'm sure. I would be a bad man. I feel like I'm incredibly blessed to be a woman. And again, like so much of like what I experienced growing up and what I've experienced as a woman, being able to be assaulted the ways that I've been assaulted has forced me to become the person that I am today. Not forced me, it was my choice to receive those things that way. And I'm proud of myself for having made certain choices the ways that I have. I'm proud of who I am today, but like, yeah, I think I'd be a very different person if things were different. So I think normally the Seven of Swords in the upright would be like, you know, but that's kind of what it is. The Seven of Swords in the reverse is kind of, you know, like you don't have to keep looking back at what it is that you do or don't have. You can fully embrace what it is that you do have and move into your transition. And it's all good. It's all good. Like the Death card, when I see the Death card, it normally does not resonate negatively with me at all. Largely in part because I'm Scorpio. It is my card. So I'm not going to look at it negatively. But especially generally when it comes up in spreads, unless they're terribly personal, I don't know, sometimes it can be ominous. But for the most part, normally I just recognize it as transition. And it seems positive. It seems good. He's coming in on a pale horse. Which I know, like, the Revelations is supposed to be a symbol of, like, Armageddon. But, like, that's also a good thing. I see it all as good. Like, it's necessary. If that's what's necessary, if amputating the entire fucking arm is what's necessary to save the whole body from a deathly virus, then so be it. You know? But I guess that's my struggle, isn't it? You know, I'm sitting here talking about, like, gender dysphoria and trans rights and I wasn't really talking about trans rights, but, like, transsexualism and my own conceptions of things and my own identity, and, like, I feel this weird social push. I had a trans woman explain to me the importance of me transitioning into a man officially. She was like, I recognize you as a man. It doesn't matter how beautiful as a woman you appear to be. I was a beautiful man prior to my transition. She's like, and I am a beautiful man, but I'm also a beautiful woman. And in my heart, I am a woman. And in order to represent what I truly believe and who I really am, this was the choice that I made to transition. And she was like pushing, like, you really should transition because it's good for the community. People need to see that. People need to see more trans men and to understand what those things mean. And I struggle with that because I like presenting myself as a woman. I like being treated like a woman. I like appealing to the type of men that like women. But more and more and more, I also find, well, one, like, pretty much every partner I've ever had actually also likes men, although they haven't always been honest about that. But yeah, they've all liked men, and, like, I'm not trying to call my partners out in any sort of way with anything that I'm not trying to, like, but, like, what they've liked about me is my masculinity. That's generally what a lot of dudes like about me, to be honest. And, like, lately, I've come across it more and more where, like, men believe I am a trans woman, and that's their interest in me. And then when they find out that I have a vagina, it's like, oh. And I get it, because I get it. I, too, am a phallic worshiper. I get it. But, I don't know, that's the thing. It's not like I'm gonna go get a penis. I know people that are men that have vaginas. It's not that weird to me, to be honest. But at the same time, it kind of is, only because of, like, I can play this macho masculine role as somebody with tits and a vagina, where, like, and that makes more sense to me than, like, if I were a man with a pussy. Like, I think I would still be able to pull the same people and just as many people. Like, I don't think it's about that at all. It's about the identification of self in that way. And it's like, I feel safe being able to express myself in my super macho qualities as a woman. Women hate it. And it is offensive to women. Like, it is, like, literally offensive to women, not just, like, women are offended by it. Like, it is offensive to women. Maybe that's what the trans woman was getting at when she was saying that, too, because she was like, you're mocking women by being how you are. And if you would just transition to being a man, then, like, this stuff would make more sense. I don't know, though. I don't know. That's not what the cards are saying. Is that what you're saying? You want me to have a sex change? Not a sex change. I don't need to. I mean, I could. If I took, I could. I literally, when I was pursuing that dude that I was infatuated with, it's such a weird conversation to have. When I was, all of this is so bizarre to me, but I'm just going with it. But when I was pursuing that dude that I was infatuated with, I was just trying everything I could possibly conjure up to get his attention and to get him to fall in love with me. I just wanted him to love me. And he wouldn't. He just kept treating me like shit, but giving me his attention. And it was like, he was like obsessed with himself, right? And he just liked that I was obsessed with him too. So I decided that a great idea would be to cosplay as him and then like take sexy photos. Which was hilarious, by the way. It was hilarious, especially because like, it's not necessarily that I looked like him. Kind of though. Obviously, it was obvious that I was playing his character. But then I kind of just, it was hilarious. He both hated and loved it. He hated that he loved it, is what it was, more than anything. Especially because I look really good with a mustache. Like, I did like a handlebar mustache, and I like wore like a Hawaiian shirt, and, like a hat, these khakis. And it was good, and I looked really good with a mustache. And I'm already a hairy bitch. I'm lucky that, like, I'm not really. I know plenty of women that are far hairier than I am. But, like, I got the genes in me. My brother is fucking covered. My oldest brother. My middle brother doesn't. So I'm like a balance between them. I'm kind of like my middle brother. But I do feel like if I were to take testosterone, I would be very hairy. I think I would get very hairy. I don't have any chest hair right now, but I feel like I think every once in a while I've gotten like a random one hair on my tit. Which I know women that actually do have chest hair, so it's not like a thing. But like, I think that I like hairy men. So maybe this is just wishful thinking. I do feel like I don't have hair on my shoulders, but I feel like I would get hairy shoulders. I feel like I'd get a hairy butt. I feel like I'd have a hairy chest, a hairy stomach. I feel like I'd potentially have like a patchy beard though. Neither of my brothers can grow like a full beard. It's weird. It's like patchy here. I don't know if that's the native in us, because like the natives normally don't grow a lot of facial hair like that. They don't really have a lot of body hair or facial hair. But then like the Scottish in us, the Irish either. We have black Irish that come from Spain originally. But I don't think they're terribly known for, they have dark hair, but they're not terribly hairy either. Maybe a little bit of chest hair. A little bit of this. Maybe the sideburns, thick hair, the curly hair. But the Scottish in my family is like, the Scots are known for having like thick, blankets of back hair and very hairy. Of course, curly, dense hair. That's what my oldest brother has. It's funny. I don't know if I'd be like that. I have considered taking testosterone. I struggled with gender dysphoria for a long time, and I grew up in a society where, like, although I was sheltered, the society around me was becoming more and more apt towards these types of things. And I definitely spent some time looking at, like, transitions, like surgical transitioning, and post-op penile implants are not for me. Not going to say anything more about it because I'm not judging people that have gone that route, but just not for me. And when my gender dysphoria was really bad, I used to struggle with having breasts, especially near my period. I've always hated having a period too, but like, who done? It's fucking the worst. But I have PMDD, and that used to be so bad. My depression and it would like trigger like a weird, like, it would trigger my gender dysphoria. I would start hating myself and hating my body, and I would hate my breasts, and I would hate the fact that I had a vagina and that I was bleeding, and like all of it felt disgusting to me, and I felt less valuable as a person because of it. And Yeah, it used to be a really big struggle for me. But as I've learned to embrace myself, you know, since I was about like, it started when I was about 19. I remember when I was 19 being like, I'm a woman. Like, realizing that I was a woman, which was huge for me because I really had still been kind of holding out for puberty. Even until I was 19, I was still just hoping that that dick would eventually just come through. Even with the tits, I was like, it don't, you know, I got them when I was like 13 and I was like, yeah, but like, I just know that my balls will drop eventually. The dick's gonna come. It's gonna come. And it just never did. Just never did. And I think I just started embracing it by the time that I was 19. And by the time I was 25, I pretty much had no more dysphoria that way. Mostly the PMDD was just depression. It wasn't triggering dysphoria, it was just triggering my depression. And then I went to therapy for 6 years and I was on antidepressants for a couple years and different things like that. But by the time after I was 30 and had kind of gone through my last little bout of depression, I just started living my life and embracing myself and pushing myself to the limits. I got the fuck out of Wisconsin. That significantly helped. Getting out of the Midwest changed everything for me, to be honest. That's why I've always been apt not to be there, because it is extremely triggering for me. I love not being there. Yeah, I just haven't felt the desire at all to be anything other than what I already am. I like, you know, I'm totally fine with us being in a time now where like clothing isn't particularly gendered, but like being able to wear stuff that makes me feel pretty. Like I like feeling pretty. I like feeling, you know, gentle and feeling like a little princess. I like that. You know, I struggle with feeling like a queen. That's one where like, especially like I'm not normally attracted to younger guys, but ever since I dated that dude last year, now I've been like slowly interested in younger guys randomly. Depends on the guy, but it's always just, I don't know. There's been some younger guys that I've just found myself very attracted to. And, with them, they always like have this thing of like wanting to call me a queen. It must be women in their generation. Like you're like, I'm a queen and that's how you're supposed to treat me. So they'll like try to treat me like that and I'm like, the fuck are you talking about? Like, call me dad. And I've had grown men call me dad and I love it. I have a daddy kink. I like calling my partners daddy, but I also like being daddy. Because I'm a gay man trapped in a woman's body. If that hasn't become clear yet, I don't know what will make it clear. I'm a man attracted to men. So being in a woman's body is like great for me. Makes it real simple. To be honest. But that doesn't mean I can't embrace my transition. I can embrace these things. I make jokes about it, and like I've said all these things before to different people, but it's generally like people that I'm like very comfortable with. And then when I'm out in public, like I do have this like thing where I like try to present myself as like extra feminine, and I'm not that. I can still dress that way, and act that way and carry myself a certain way, but like I can embrace these parts of myself more and deeper. Can we get, like, something else? Something else so I can figure out what the fuck. It's, like, the weirdest. These reads are just getting weirder and weirder. I don't even know what's going on anymore. And that's fine. I apologize. I don't know. I've never seen anything like this, but we make it work. Okay. So I have the Queen of Swords. The Queen of Swords came out in the upright directly under the Ace of Swords, which is great. Great. That's perfect, right? I can embody that. That's good. It's like a balance. Like the Queen of Swords. But she's so strong. She's not ultra feminine. She's just who she is, and she's proud. She's strong, and she has the truth. She's like clouds on her cloak, and stars on her crown. She's very pleasant. But stern. She's very stern. You know, she's dominant for sure. But there's like clouds and everything behind. It's not like in, you know, like the King of Wands actually is like a much more grounded energy, where the Queen of Swords has this like light, airy energy, while still being stern, still being honest, direct, dominant, assertive, just less aggressive. It's that macho masculinity thing that I'm needing to work on. Okay. It's part of it, at least. 3 cards actually came out. So they're under my 2 cards, but I'm thinking that, how is this? Well, it looks like this one must go directly here. I have the 5 of Cups in the reverse, directly under my King of Swords or King of Wands in the reverse. And that's like, I don't have to worry about, like I said, like it's like the King of Wands in reverse is like a cuck card. Like I don't have to worry about like these insecurities. I don't need to focus on the insecurities. I can walk away from those things and I can begin to focus on the things that I do have, which is so funny because then there's the 4 of Pentacles in reverse that I have with my 7 of Swords in reverse. That's like normally that's the 4 of Pentacles in reverse is like, I mean normally the 4 of Pentacles in the upright is like holding on, clinging to material concepts, to material abundance, to the things that make me feel secure physically. And this is like, you don't have to do that. You don't have to worry about those things. You can embrace who you really are without having to have things be so tangible. Which I guess goes into even like my theory of everything, because truly we aren't living in a tangible reality. And that is, I think, what we get so caught up in. That's honestly something I'm constantly preaching about, to be honest, is the tangibility and not needing external validation and not looking for, you know, like external validation for anything. You just embrace the truth and it speaks for itself. Underneath the transition I have the 9 of Cups in reverse. Hold on, can I have one more? Thank you. Where are all these in reverse? The Knight of Cups in reverse. Okay. So underneath the Death card, I got the 9 of Cups in reverse. Which to me for a second was feeling like, because he's contented with his 9 of Cups. He's actually quite smug. He's quite proud of everything that he has, and he is quite contented with it. But it immediately made me feel like, you don't have to like hold on so tightly even to knowing the things that you have. It's not the 10 of Cups, which is like ultimate fulfillment, right? That's what I was thinking about, is that the Ten of Cups is ultimate fulfillment, and so the Nine of Cups is normally a positive one, but in the reverse, it came across as negative with the message being positive. You have all of these things and you're contented with them, but that doesn't mean that you have to stop there. It's kind of the feeling that I got. Like, it doesn't mean that you have to stop there, because there's still, you have 9 and you can be happy with the 9 that you have, but there's still a 10 of Cups out there for you. That's how it works. So I asked for one more card, and the card that I get out is the fucking Knight of Cups in the reverse to match the 9 of Cups in reverse. I often view the Knight of Cups in the upright as a receiving card. You're receiving an opportunity for love. You're receiving a, you know, like in the reverse, it feels like it's more, you're receiving, like, well, in the upright, it feels like you're, you know, like I read it as you're receiving an opportunity for emotional fulfillment of some degree. Or like you're being offered that. But in the reverse, I'm seeing it as like I am offering myself that. I'm bringing myself my 10th cup, my ultimate fulfillment. And I get it, like, on my own night and stuff like that, but, like, it's so interesting, too, because he is also on a white horse, and it's almost like a perfect reflection of the Death card. I don't know if you can see that very well. I'm gonna look up what this flower symbol on the Death card actually means, because I don't know. It kind of looks like a poppy flower, but I don't think that's what it is. And in my head I'm saying chrysanthemum, and I don't think that's what's going on there either. But I think my phone, this phone is dead. Maybe it's just close. Okay, it's actually still. About to die? Yeah, I got the battery. Okay. So we're gonna look up the meaning. Sorry, hold on. Death card. Okay. Forgot this phone sucks. Death card. Wait. The white rose, oh, it's a wild rose, on the black flag carried by the Grim Reaper on the Death card symbolizes endings, transitions, and new beginnings. Yeah, I know that. Let's look up, it's supposed to be a rose according to some reading I just did. Symbolic of rebirth, beauty, and purification. It's a Tudor rose, or rather the white rose of the House of York. This should be the right answer. Hold on. The White Rose of York is a white heraldic rose, which was adopted in the 14th century as a heraldic badge of the Royal House of York. In modern times, it is used more broadly as a symbol of Yorkshire. In heraldry, the Rose of York is blazoned as a rose argent barbed and seated proper. The heraldic rose may be used by either at the top. No, but what does it mean? Devolutionist political party with elected representatives active in Yorkshire. Uses a stylized white rose of York. International uses. See also references. Heraldic rose. What do you look at? Heraldry. Herald. Okay, so the cup that I'm bringing myself is a heralding. I'm pretty sure this is just a validation that I'm on the right track, to be honest. More or less. I think it's broken it down in weird ways, and I guess probably just so I could communicate a lot of these weird things, because somebody needed to hear it. Lord knows I've heard enough of it. But I think, yeah, I think I've already got it. It doesn't really feel like I'm missing anything, to be honest. I'm like trying to place it and all these different things, but like that's what I'm seeing. Yeah, the Death card is a powerful card. It's also just like reminding me that like I can put away the old man, my stepdad, like those concepts that have forced me into a certain macho quality that is not fitting of me, and I can embrace my inner child, which is just like a sweet, innocent little girl. Goofball, likes to play with Barbies, likes to play with dolls, you know, loves her baby doll, very, very maternal. Yeah, as a little girl, I was maternal for sure. I loved caring for animals. And I loved expressing myself and singing and dancing and drawing and annoying the fuck out of my brothers. I've become much more masculine as I have grown and as I've gotten older, and it certainly is a mask and defense mechanism to a large degree. I can admit that. Especially like, you know, I started this thing off talking about sexual assaults. Like I learned to just kind of embrace being assaulted as a form of defense. But I think in order to counteract that vulnerability, I picked up this macho masculinity in order to be like, I'm not less capable, and I'm not weak just because I've been assaulted, right? And I guess that's what, you know, because like I said, like that's, as I was thinking about my healing today, like I started talking about myself in defense of a woman, and then realized that it was more important for me to express it in the realm of everyone, and how this isn't exclusively a woman's issue, but rather an issue of predatory behavior versus vulnerability versus having healthy, open spaces to be able to express these experiences in our society. And so I guess my takeaway from this reading would be that to be aware of when I'm masking and when I'm using a macho masculinity to overcompensate for a fear of vulnerability, and that in those times it is more than acceptable for me to embrace my femininity, but to also be kind to myself, to embrace my inner child, and to recognize that from the get-go, I've also always been somebody given towards that's a hard one, actually, because now that I'm thinking about it, it's like, yeah, I actually do wonder just how much of my gender identity and my gender dysphoria was actually coming from that strong push for masculinity in my life. You know? Like, I was raised by misogynists. There wasn't a space for me to be a glorified woman, an honorable woman in that way. I was being trained to be a submissive woman and to be, like, I have the capacity to be a housewife. I actually very greatly enjoy the service of that role. But that doesn't mean that I need to, like, accept disrespect and abuse. And those weren't lines drawn for me in childhood. Those were lines I had to learn to draw for myself as an adult. And I'm still learning how to draw those lines and what lines I can get rid of and what lines I can cross and what this picture is really supposed to look like. It's fine for things to be a process. I think that's something that's so beautiful about the death card as well, is because, like, as definitive as it can be, distinctive as there is life and then there is death, right? And it can come across that way, and kind of create that sense of division and duality, but it is also energetically and spiritually taken as a representation of transition, and transition is a progression. And I don't think that there's ever, in the embracing of transition, there's never fully an end. You know, there was never fully a beginning and there's never fully an end, and that's something that's beautiful too. You know, just like there's, you know, I know people that are perfectly comfortable with being in a constant state of transition because they haven't fully figured themselves out, even though they figured out aspects of themselves and been able to pursue those things. But I also know people that have transitioned in their life in different ways, not just sexually, but in different ways, or not, you know, not just transition their genders, but their identity in these different ways where, like, it's definitive, and I recognize it in my own life, but like where it is definitive, and at that point, like, you know, a trans woman doesn't want to be called a trans woman. She's just a woman. A trans man doesn't want to be called a trans man. He's just a man, right? And like I said, these are all different fine lines, and they're all really for the individual to draw for themselves. And I think I put a lot of focus on other people in that way and trying to help other people get to that space, but I haven't even properly done that for myself yet. And right now I am definitely in a time of self-care and self-analyzation and purification and balance and stability and identification of self, and, you know, sustaining myself and being able to really, you know, ground myself and be able to move from that direction into whatever's next for me. So yeah, I'll be processing this for some time. These weird ass readings, I tell you what, they're getting deep. They're getting extremely deep, but I'm thankful for it. You know, it's good to be in this space and to be able to communicate these types of things. I'm sure so much of what I have said, especially in this reading, has been just insanely triggering, but I hope that if you bore through it, that it lightened up by this point. and that there's something good to be taken out of it for you. I'm definitely taking a lot of good out of it. I got a lot to process. Yeah. You don't have to be afraid of who you are or be ashamed of who you are. It's okay to be a work in progress. Okay. On to the next weird thing I have to say and talk about. Okay. Have a good night.